We've had great supervisors. They like the desert.
Right.
But until you live in it and you understand why it's unique and special to us and why we don't want large-scale utility energy companies coming in.
Exactly.
So to be that voice, I don't mind making the drive to be that voice.
Hi, and welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, a weekly conversation with women who found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode 113. If you'd like more information about the podcast, it's all at the website desertladydiaries.com, and I invite you to engage with the guests, with other listeners, or me on social media, on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries, or on Twitter at Desert Lady Diary. A Southern California native, San Bernardino County 3rd District Supervisor Dawn Rowe was appointed to the Board of Supervisors in December 2018. Prior to serving on the board, Dawn was elected to the Yucca Valley Town Council and served from 2010 to 2014, during which time she was selected by her peers to serve as town mayor. Dawn is the widow of Marine Corps Captain Alan Rowe, who was killed in action during Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2004. Following his death, she began a career in land development, which spurred an interest in public service. As an elected official, Dawn's focus is making San Bernardino County a business-friendly environment. She is the proud mother of Blake and Caitlin, who attend Seton Hall and University of Southern California, respectively. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I've never interviewed someone with my name.
I just had breakfast with another one this morning, too.
Really?
Isn't that,
oh, my goodness.
Yes, isn't that unusual?
Three's a good number. And Seton Hall.
And my son is actually in South Orange, and my daughter's in USC.
Okay. How did he decide to go to New Jersey?
So we took a family trip years and years ago when he was little, and he fell in love with New York. And then we went back later, and he still loved New York. And we went back a third time, and he's like, I need to live in New York. So
cool.
He got close. So he's just across the Hudson River.
Right. Well, I grew up in New Jersey.
Oh, you did?
I left in 96 and never went back. But growing up there, it was always a dream of mine to live in Manhattan. And I never, well, I shouldn't say never. Things can happen. What was your first experience with desert?
So my first experience with the desert was when my late husband and I were stationed in Camp Pendleton, and we were on our way to a Marine Corps ball in Las Vegas and with his unit, and he needed something for a uniform, so he said, oh, let's drive the back way through 29 Palms, and I'll stop at the PX on base and get the item that I need for the uniform. So I remember coming up the Morongo grade and hitting Morongo Valley, and my first thought was, who lives out here? So it was really interesting to think then, you fast forward all those years later, that this is me living out here.
Right.
And I love it.
That's great.
Yeah.
What was it then, just the normal kind of transfer that happens when you live in the military that he came to? Was he stationed in 29 at any point?
We were.
Okay.
So we had been all over with the Marine Corps and done a lot of time in the San Diego and Coronado area.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful. And then Virginia. And then from Virginia, we got orders out to 29 Palms. And I remember him saying, yeah, that was the place where we stopped for the uniform item on our way to Vegas. I'm like, wait, in the middle of nowhere? So that's sort of my first introduction to the desert in the Morongo Basin.
What year was that?
Way before we had kids.
Okay.
So I'm going to go with mid-90s.
Wow. So talk to me about what it was like driving through here. And
Well, from mid-90s to when I moved out here in 2003, it probably didn't change all that much.
Okay.
It was remote. It was rural. We didn't have a Home Depot. We didn't have a Starbucks. We didn't have anything like that.
Right.
We had a Walmart, but that was it. We didn't have an Applebee's. I mean, none of that was here when I first moved here.
And did you spend most of your time, did you live on base when you were
Never.
up here?
No.
Okay.
So it was our compromise that we lived in Yucca on the east side, so he could commute to work, and my kids were little. So when we were stationed out here in 2003, they were 2 and 4 when we were out here. And so for play groups or access to the Children's Museum down below, just a little bit more of a population and things for me as a mother of young ones.
Sure,
We
yeah.
compromised and lived in Yucca Valley. So
Okay. How did you meet your community then? Is it typically military wives just kind of find each other?
So
or
a combination of volunteering in the schools with my kids, my church family, and the military wives. So
Okay.
there were a few military wives that lived out in town, although most of them lived in 29, not so much in Yucca. And we would rotate the playgroup. So we would go on base in 29 and then out in here. So that's how I connected with the military community. And then my church home at that time was a tremendous sort of, that's actually, I guess it's all of them why we stayed here after he was killed, because what a neat opportunity to have access to the military and the base, but not be on it. So we had to transition to civilian life. We were close enough to all the culture and commercial things that you would want down below. But then we had the unique opportunity to live where it's just peaceful and beautiful.
Yeah, and it is.
Yeah.
Peaceful and beautiful. You obviously took a liking to the place.
I did.
Because you decided to stay.
I tell everybody it takes about a full year. You have to get through your first summer where you absolutely swear up and down you're never, it's like having children or running a marathon. You swear that you'll never do it again, and then all of a sudden it grows on you. And you have to get through your first summer, and then the fall, like right now, it's so beautiful. The wind, the leaves changing.
Yeah.
And
I think people would be surprised to hear that, the leaves changing.
They do.
Because they do. We do have some trees other than cactuses and Joshua trees here that do change.
The leaves do fall, and then you have that first snow, where I never thought that we would have snow up here. And one of our winters, we had probably 18 inches at my house.
Wow. I was in love I think it was last winter. It was a Thursday, because I typically work a part-time job in the afternoon. And I said, I'm not going in. It's not that I didn't trust myself, because I grew up in snow.
Right.
Just the peacefulness, because always growing up on the East Coast, whenever that snow started, there's just kind of this hush that comes over everything. And that's exactly what happened that day. I put on a jacket and some boots, and I went walking with my camera, because you don't get those opportunities here.
You don't. And so when it snows here, it's so unique and unusual, but at least we have the opportunity to have it.
Right, yeah.
And people are surprised by that, because you say I live in the desert, and then you say, no, my home's about 4,000 feet in elevation.
Right.
So it could be raining in town, but snowing at the house. And that's fun. Then you get to spring and the wildflowers and the opportunity to be outdoors, and then the winds. And then you say, the winds are coming. Wait, that means the heat's coming. And then you cycle through.
Yeah.
But after you've been through it once and you realize evaporative coolers are great, the absolute neatest thing, I didn't know what one was.
Right.
I had no idea what a swamp cooler was. So for me to be able to wear a hoodie in the summertime and not have my electric bill be over $200 if I wanted to, that's fantastic.
And to the point of the snow, we also get a beautiful view of it on the mountains. So even if it isn't snowing here, just driving up and down Highway 62, we can admire it from afar and don't really have to be in it, so to speak.
Very true.
It must have been very difficult for you to have lost your husband.
It was not an easy time.
And some people would say, well, when people sign up for the military, there's always a chance that will happen.
Of course.
How did you get through that?
So we were prepared, practically. I mean, wills and things like that, but you never really think that it happens to somebody else, never happens to us.
Right.
And so a combination of the Marine Corps and the support that they provided with the actual logistics of what happens when your spouse is killed in action. I was a volunteer for the Marine Corps, so I was the one helping younger wives be prepared for this.
Wow.
And all of a sudden I find myself then in need of the stuff that I was teaching people. So fortunately I had a little bit of a skill set in that. I had been trained in the volunteering for that. And then my personal family, and then my church family. And my community, like my neighbor. So Lucas Niles, who is our lieutenant for the sheriff's station.
Oh, okay.
His daughter Caitlin and my daughter Caitlin, we lived across, like catty corner, right across the street. And the kids would play, and they met when they were 2. Wow. And so now he's our lieutenant, and I work for the county. And how fun is it that our work lives overlap with our social lives and our play groups, and his wife Teresa, and it's those connections that are small town wonderful.
I think that's a great appeal for a lot of the people who come here or who have lived here for a long time. It's that ability to actually go into the grocery store and run into 2 or 3 people that you know, or at the library or at a community meeting, whatever it might be.
But with 2 young kids, and you say, Teresa, would you mind watching my kids while I go to the grocery store? Because it's so much easier to not take the 2 and the 4-year-old or the 3 and 5-year-old.
Right.
So
how old were they when that happened?
They were 3 and 5 when their dad died.
Wow.
Yeah, they were little.
So you've done the single mom thing.
Long time.
Yeah. Well, good for you. You've got them
Thank you.
both in really good schools and really good places.
Yeah. So far, so good.
Yeah. What spurred you to get into public service?
So I was raised in a family that we were very volunteer oriented, and we were taught to give back to our communities, to organizations, to help those that were less fortunate. And so I guess that's sort of just a mindset that you're raised with. And then, so the house that I lived in when my husband was killed, we stayed in that for a few years. And that's just hard as you try to, you can change pictures on the wall and you can put new decorations, but it is. It's very difficult to, I used to walk into the closet where his clothes were, and even after his clothes were gone, it's like I stole his space. It's not, it just wasn't right. It was hard to move on emotionally.
Yeah.
And so I really felt that my soul needed a fresh start. So the kids and I built a house. We still live in the home today, and we had a great time building it. It was a fun, cathartic project for all of us.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that experience so much that I thought it would be neat to, I bought another piece of property and I wanted to subdivide it. And so my thought was, we'll build another home. This was so it was a 10-acre parcel, cut it in half and build a home on 5 acres that we sell off. And then the profit from that, we build another home and we live on 5 acres. And it's right near where I live now. And so 2 things happened. That process of subdividing, which way too long for the podcast, but that right there is what caused me to be frustrated and to go into our local government offices at the town and say, why this? Why are you requiring this? And then they'd explain it and they'd say, well, you have to do this study and you have to do that study. Okay. And then they'd take it for a while and then they'd say, okay, here, now you have to do this study. And then I come back, well, that one expired already. Well, you didn't tell me there was a shelf life. It took them too long. Just that type of bureaucracy.
Like a never-ending.
No, and they're very helpful. They mean well. And some of it was state issues. So I introduced myself to then Assemblyman Cook and said, how can we make this better? And I found out he lived in Yucca Valley. I went to our mayor at the time, Chad Mays, and I said, why is land use so complicated, expensive, and this just onerous? He's like, go be my planning commissioner. So I was his planning commissioner.
Wow.
Learned land use. And then in 2008, the market crashed. So I couldn't get through the subdividing process soon enough to build that and sell my home. So even though I finally ended up finishing subdividing it, we never moved because of the market. It just never recovered in enough time for us to be able to sell the home. So at that point, I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I had gotten a teaching credential to go substitute in the class. And I was substitute teaching, and Paul Cook offered me part-time work with him. So I did both of those things and was able to sort of be that stay-at-home mom while working part-time.
Right.
So that's kind of where it all started.
Mayor of Yucca Valley.
So planning commission then led to the council. The planning commission makes recommendations for policy, and then the council can implement or not. And I got frustrated they weren't implementing, so I decided to run. So that's kind of how that all came about.
Right. Kind of like, I want to be the change that I want to see.
Absolutely.
Essentially.
And great lessons for the kids.
Absolutely.
Don't complain. If you want to do something, teach yourself. It's not that hard. Learn a new skill set. And if you can implement change, do it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I would be remiss in this interview, for those who are listening that are from the area, if I didn't mention what I would call, I guess, the elephant in the room, that you were appointed to the Board of Supervisors when our previous supervisor, James Ramos, won his election bid for California State Assembly.
Right.
And there is actually a political advocacy group that's called IE United that has filed a suit that your appointment was in violation of the Brown Act. And I guess I just want to know if you're able to offer any comments on that, or...
They challenged the process. When the process was going on, and I didn't know any of the supervisors. I had met a couple of them in the past when I was on the council. So I wasn't familiar with any of that. I threw in my name and application and resume thinking there's no chance in heck that they're ever going to appoint somebody from Yucca Valley. And then as the process went on, IE United took issue with how they did the process.
Gotcha.
And then they served them, I think, I wasn't a part of it, but they said, we didn't like
something that you did. And so they stopped the process. This is in December of 2018. And then they started it over to cure the violation in essence. And then the process continued to move forward. I get the appointment, and then shortly thereafter, they said, we didn't like your cure. We don't think it was acceptable, so we're going to challenge your process because we think you violated the Brown Act. So it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with that process. And that's being worked out in the courts. Yeah. Right. So I still continue to act as a de facto officer and do the job.
And you've also put your hat in the ring for re-election, right?
So when I first sought the appointment, I was hopeful that they would just want somebody for 2 years. I hate long-term planning. After my husband, we had plans to move to Idaho, where he was from.
Oh, my goodness.
We were saving for retirement. We knew where we wanted to build a house and what we wanted to do. And then I'm in Yucca Valley without him now. So that was exceptionally painful for me. And it became sort of a coping mechanism to just say, okay, I can get through today if I only plan for this hour and then the next hour and then just day to day.
Life-changing.
It is. And then as I looked back a couple of years after his death, I realized that I have been able to do so many interesting and unique things. I may not have ever stayed out here. So if I planned my future, I wouldn't have gotten to experience all these wonderful things.
Right.
So I just stopped and thought, I'm going to let God take me where God wants me to go and just kind of wing it. And so when the Board of Supervisors said, well, we want the person to commit to running again, I'm like, well, that's not how I roll. I don't really want to do that. And I just want, if I like the job and I want to do it again, I'll run for it. But if I don't like the job, or if there's somebody better, let them do it. So in that interview process, they said, well, if you'd really like to be considered, we want you publicly to go on record and commit to running again. So I told them I'd think about it. And these are all public interviews. You're being videotaped.
Right.
And it's on the internet.
Right.
And then I went back and I said, I've talked to my family. I've really given this some sincere thought. And okay. So at that point, then I committed to running again.
Yeah. So for someone listening who doesn't know what the scope and size of your district is as 3rd District, can you kind of give them the lay of the land? So
it's the most interesting district, in my opinion, because we have 3 types of terrain or different. We have the mountains. In San Bernardino County, we have mountains, we have desert, and then we have the valley area where the population, the metropolitan section is. And every other district has 1 or maybe 2 of those things, but the 3rd District has them all. We divide our districts by population, so they each have about 500,000, and that's how they draw the lines. So it's a little quirky. Wacky.
Yeah.
So there's 11 cities in the 3rd District.
Cities, not including unincorporated.
Cities.
Okay.
Yes. Wow. So we go as far east, we go beyond 29 Palms to the east. We'd go up, not quite to Amboy. Then you come back through the Morongo Basin, Joshua Tree, Yucca Valley, Morongo Valley, and then it goes out to the east, to the sort of the north, where we have Landers, Flamingo Heights, and Johnson Valley, Lucerne Valley, and then it goes up Highway 247 to Barstow, and it has parts of the 40, so I have the Marine Corps Logistics Base out there. So that's it for sort of the desert area. And then from Lucerne Valley, it goes up the backside, up the 18, past the Mitsubishi Mine Plant.
Oh, my goodness.
Up into Baldwin Lake, Irwin Lake, Big Bear Lake, and it has all of that area. And then it drops down the front side of the mountain. And I have parts of San Bernardino, parts of Colton, all of Grand Terrace, all of Loma Linda, all of Redlands, all of Yucaipa, and Highland. And then the unincorporated.
How's your gas mileage?
I drive a little Honda Civic, and I'm looking at a plug-in hybrid next. So, in the city of San Bernardino itself, I picture your hand, and the bulk of the city is here, and then Supervisor Gonzalez has these 2 fingers of the city, and then unincorporated pockets, and then I have these 2 and unincorporated pockets, and so it's really unique.
Yeah. Well, and largest county in land mass in the United States.
Yes.
Do you know how many square miles your territory covers?
I don't know on ours. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Your bio says that you're business friendly. So for folks who live here, specifically in Joshua Tree, that are still steaming about the construction of the Dollar General on Highway 62, can you just expand your definition of business friendly and what that means to you?
So when we have small businesses, mom and pop. And I wasn't, that Dollar General has been moving forward for years and years and years.
It's been almost 10, I think.
I don't know. Way before my time involved in the county.
Yeah.
So when you have a small business, and I'll take my neighbor, for example, he is a contractor. And Landu Services is open on Wednesdays. And he needs things that need to go down the hill, because if he can't get here on a Wednesday, then he has to go to San Bernardino. That's not really business friendly. So we have a little kiosk that you'll pass.
Yep.
Yeah, so we can connect you to Landu Services anytime. So if you walk in here and you don't know that we're only open on Wednesday and it's Tuesday, you can actually reach somebody in Landu Services.
Oh, that's great.
When he delivers his sets of plans, they review them and they'll say, great, please come pick them up. He'll drive down, he'll pick them up. He'll come home, he'll do whatever he needs to do on our easy online permitting, and then they'll say, now we just need you to drop him off at environmental health, which, oh, by the way, is in San Bernardino. That's ludicrous. That's ridiculous. He doesn't have time to stop a job site, to go down and just hand deliver this. He doesn't have the means to pay somebody just to be the errand person. So why are we doing that? So making those changes to make businesses so that they can actually function. Our fire marshals get out to do inspections on Wednesdays. If he misses a Wednesday, the fire marshal, and there's no backup person to do that, our contractors, they have drywall lined up, they have insulation lined up, and they have all these things, and if that inspector doesn't show, everybody gets pushed out weeks then. So there have been frustrations with our small businesses that say doing business at the county is expensive, it's time consuming, it's really hard to understand, and can you help make that easier? So part of my commitment is, tell me what the problem is, and we dig into it and we go, oh, well, that's an easy fix, or that's a couple of departments, but we'll get the department heads talking. Can you come in and give us your experience? So we're really trying department by department to make it easier for folks that live remotely out here so that they don't have to make that drive down.
Well, and I know just as a resident, there's a great appreciation for the video conferencing center.
Oh, sure.
Which allows us to come here to the Bob
Have a
Burke
voice
Center.
without having to go
Exactly.
down.
Right. We don't have to drive to San Bernardino to say, hey, we don't think this is a good idea, or hey, great, move ahead with it. We can come here and have the experience without having to drive to San Bernardino. So thank you for continuing that.
So door to door is about an hour and 15 minutes each direction. That's without traffic if I leave early enough. And so I feel bad sometimes. Like, I love living up here. So for me, I don't mind the drive. I can return phone calls. I can talk to constituents and do things like that.
Yeah.
But I love having, because the rest of the supervisors, although supervisor love it and good gets it, but the rest of them, they don't get it. They don't understand why we live out here.
Right.
And our interests haven't been represented. We've had great supervisors. They like the desert.
Right.
But until you live in it and you understand why it's unique and special to us and why we don't want large-scale utility energy companies coming in.
Exactly.
And so to be that voice, I don't mind making the drive to be that voice.
Awesome.
So
thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
So on that same level with your constituents in rural areas finding it difficult to do business, I pulled a quote from something called inlandempire.us that says, you've been working hard the past 8 months to make sure my constituents understand they have an advocate in the Board of Supervisors. So with that, the Morongo Basin is definitely growing.
Oh, yeah.
And I see either on social media or I hear at local MAC meetings that people are having difficulty, say, getting help from law enforcement or things of that nature. Are any conversations happening at the county Board of Supervisors level with regard to increased staffing of, say, the San Bernardino County sheriffs or anything like that?
So, yes and no. A lot of the reasons why we need help with sheriff is not because we're understaffed or they're not doing their job appropriately, but the calls that are coming in are really code enforcement calls, for example, and not sheriff calls. So if you live next door to a loud and crazy Airbnb that's having a band or a wedding or unruly people that aren't being nice neighbors, what do? Who do you call?
The police.
Right. That's not, you should be calling code enforcement. So but
that doesn't even
doesn't register.
No.
Right.
And they're closed usually, you know, when that's happening.
Of course. So what happens then is our resources of the sheriff's department are being allocated to that. Same thing happens with fire department. So if your neighbor has an Airbnb and you see that there's a fire going on in the backyard and you know it's somebody from not around here, that it's windy and you're thinking, why do they have a fire right now? Who do you call? Well, you call 911 and say, my neighbor's having a fire, they should be having a fire. Fire department comes, but it's taxing our resources. So we're in the process of trying to figure out, why do we have so many calls for service that are really non-emergency, but you need help,
People
right?
don't know what to do. Yeah.
True. So that's what we're trying to work on, is we budgeted for 2 more code enforcement officers up here to let folks know that we have an app. It's free. It's called SB Code.
I have it on my phone, man. Yeah. It's
allows you to
great.
drop a pin, take a picture, send it in,
Yep.
and say, this is the infraction, the trash pile, the whatever it is. That's a code enforcement issue. A lot of our law enforcement calls are really code enforcement calls. So trying at the Board of Supervisors to figure out, how do we educate our public to say, call this, do this instead of, and then allow our law enforcement officers to really do what they need to do. So that's the main thing
great.
right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. And getting that word out is
Right.
very valuable. So we've got an affordable housing issue happening here. Real estate is rising, which is great. But we've got families of kids that are in school that are either in homelessness or close to homelessness. I understand that there's students at the community college living out of cars. Anything happening at the county level to address that? Because as I understand, the closest even shelter is Indio to our location.
So 2 answers to that. We are looking at, right now, the old fire station in Panorama Heights, which is actually what Mark and I were just talking about, making that a resource center for people that are either on the verge of or homeless, to say, come in, here's a computer, here are brochures, here's transportation, how can we help you? How did you find yourself in this position?
Right.
Is it a loss of employment? Is it a divorce? Is it whatever it is? And figure out, how can we get them back into having an earning, a livable wage, where they can find rent, purchase a home, whatever the problem is. So that's one aspect that we're doing right now, is trying to find a place for that resource center to go. So that's currently happening.
Great.
And then at the same time, what's happened to create the lack of affordable housing? So here is something,
Yes.
might be a little too complicated for the time we have, but we have an imbalance here with, our market has shifted with the influx of vacation rentals.
Yep.
They're not currently regulated in the county. There's no permit that you pull. There are no guidelines.
Nope.
So all of them are actually operating illegally as a business. We are just about ready in the month of November to have what passed in the Planning Commission come before the Board of Supervisors to say, if you want to operate a vacation rental, here is the process. You have to apply for a permit. Your permit's going to be good for 2 years. We are going to hold you to these standards, and it's going to cost you some money to do this. And if you're in violation, we're going to revoke your permit. That is going to make it less appealing for many people. It costs to clean them. It costs to advertise them. They're not making the margins that they thought they were making, and now we're going to go add more cost to that, which is needed.
Well, and then the flip side of that is that there are a number of people that are making money cleaning.
Of
that's
course.
their job. Yeah. So
Right. No, and it's great. It's
complicated.
created an industry,
Yeah.
which is great. But there are so many that aren't regulated. When the regulation comes in, I think you'll see a shift. Those people that are, wow, this isn't as easy as I thought it was. This isn't as lucrative as I thought it was. So I think I'm going to back out of this now and turn that back into a long-term rental. So the Marine Corps workforce housing is a problem. They can't house all the Marines on base. Now there's no affordable housing out in town for the Marines either. So it's not only our locals and families, it's the Marines, it's all of us that are
Right.
affected by that. So we're hopeful that implementation of a short-term rental ordinance will actually bring our market back into a normal balance.
Have there been any thoughts to working with organizations like Habitat for Humanity, or like Wells Fargo has this new philanthropic program that they're committing them to affordable housing until the year 2025?
No, but I love it.
Okay, I'll give
Yeah.
you the guy's name because I wrote
Sure.
down what
Yeah.
his name was from Wells Fargo. But I mean, those are things probably, and being a rural community, I think those are things that could be appealing
Right.
to at least do a public-private partnership of some sort that might help.
Sure.
I know we've got issues with septic use and how that affects groundwater and all that stuff. It needs to be
Sure.
looked at, but those are a few things that might help. I guess last, because we are running out of time, often in Joshua Tree specifically, or many other unincorporated areas, especially it seems new people to the area, always ask, why don't we incorporate? why don't we become a town or a city like Yucca Valley or 29 Palms?
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of go over the requirements, the things that are required in order to make that happen?
So, simplistically speaking, you have to have about 10,000 in your population. So your sphere of influence would need to have about 10,000 people. Mm-hmm. And you have to show an agency called LAFCO, which stands for Local Agency Formation Commission. They decide who becomes cities, who disincorporates, special districts, water districts. Mm. They make sure that they audit your books. They do check-in, make sure that you're in balance and that you're sustainable. Mm-hmm. And the requirements that they have, can you provide your own water? Can you provide your own electric? So if you have Edison that mm-hmm. serves you.
Okay.
All the utilities. Mm-hmm. Do you have water and sewer or septic? All of those things. Joshua Tree has, I would think, all of those things, depending upon how wide you drew your sphere of influence for the 10,000 people, mm-hmm. and then you vote on it. And you would ask LAFCO to come in and to do a study, a feasibility study on if it's feasible to incorporate, what that would look like, mm-hmm. and then they would present that back.
Gotcha. Because I see it
That's
a lot.
That's the process.
Yeah, I see it a lot,
yeah.
Especially in our local Facebook group, mm-hmm. often especially new people.
You have to have the tax base to be able to provide police and fire.
Right.
So, and they look at that. They
mm-hmm.
look at your population, they look at the median income, and they'll say, well, police and fire are expensive. Are you going to provide your own, or are you going to contract with the county, and what that would look like? Mm-hmm. And then they come back with a...
Well, and at the end of the day, you also have to have people within the community that are willing to step up and be on a city council,
right.
be the mayor, mm-hmm. and do all of the administration that's required. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I think that, you know, it has its pluses and minuses
sure.
being unincorporated.
Right.
But
if you're, like in this case, where you have a supervisor that lives up here, that's pretty cool because
yeah.
I get it, right?
Right.
I live it.
Mm-hmm.
Our challenges, our uniqueness, our opportunities.
Right.
So I am that voice and that advocate, but I won't be here forever.
No.
And I can't be in all places at all times. So I can see the desire for mm-hmm. some of that local control.
That said, what are some suggestions that you can make to the residents mm-hmm. of how, because it seems, I've only been here 3 years, but I know there are people that have been here their whole lives or, you mm-hmm. know, over 30, 40, 50 years. And it seems like there's this constant battle with things that either planning and land use want to bring in, and where, you know, we fill up the room, the video conferencing center, and we give all our comments. What else can we possibly do to help, besides your advocacy on the Board of Supervisors, to get them to understand what we love here and what we don't want to see?
They know. When you fill up that room, it absolutely makes an impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, some would say it didn't make that much of an impact with the Dollar General, but that wasn't on your watch.
Yeah,
that was, you know, and then we have, the issues with that are not only the effect on the village itself, which I believe is a perfect companion to the park visit when someone comes out here. You know, they have the park and then mm-hmm. they come down and, you know, they do all their little things in Joshua Tree, which is unlike where they live,
right.
I'm sure. And as soon as we start littering the highway with corporate entities, I don't know if it's going to be that special. And what, you know,
it is such a difficult legal challenge. How do you legally say we don't want your business, but we want yours? You're discriminating, and that then gets into a judicial branch. So
yeah. It's a bigger and longer conversation than we have time for today.
Yeah.
How has the desert changed you?
Oh, I love the desert. It has given me a sense of peace. Mm-hmm. And when I'm away, I can't wait to get back. Crack the window at night, listen to the owl. Mm-hmm. I have an owl that perches right outside my window. I think it's given me a greater appreciation for, I think back to that time when we drove through and I saw all the telephone poles on 62 and thought, who lives out here and why? To not be that judging person when I go through a different area and I might say the same type of thing.
Interesting.
To say, when I'm in New York with my son, I probably couldn't. I love to visit it.
Right.
Love to visit, right?
Yeah.
But it's once or twice a year. It's fun. But I will find myself saying, how do you live out here? You have to take your dog down how many stories in an elevator to go out to a park? Mm-hmm. Who does that? But I have never been there. So I try not to judge because there is a uniqueness to all sorts of different places.
Exactly. And it's just a person's constitution and what they can, what they like and what they don't.
And sometimes different seasons in our life at different times.
Absolutely.
So
before I let you go, I would love you to pick 4 numbers between 1 and 50. This is for my Patreon subscribers. It's called Diary Unlocked, where they will get exclusive content. Your answers to these questions are that content. So if you would give me your 4 numbers.
All right, let's go with 8, 24, 36, 48.
Hike. It sounds like football. Okay, the questions Dawn is going to come back on the other side and answer are, was there ever a time you thought you wouldn't need to support yourself if you were married? Well, that's an interesting spin, isn't it? What's the last book you read and why did you read it? What gets you out of bed in the morning? And the last question will be, is female progression in the workplace better or worse? So if you want to hear Dawn's answers to those questions, go out to desertladydiaries.com, click on the support page, and sign up to be a patron on Patreon. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me today. It's been fantastic.
Thanks.
I have a lot of shout-outs this week. It makes me very happy. First, to Susan J. Thank you so much for your email and guest suggestion. I appreciate you sending that, and we'll add her to the list. I may or may not have mentioned this in the past, but my list of potential guests is up to about 286, with just 113 in the can, so I've got a ways to go. And you should know that sometimes I do reach out to someone, and for their own reasons, they decline the offer, though I do my best. Ellen P., thank you so much for coming on as a patron on Patreon. I am so glad to have you and hope that you are enjoying the Diary Unlocked episodes. Lily, Karen D., Joanna S., thank you so much for signing up for the weekly newsletter. I really appreciate your support. I try to make it a habit to go in and check on the ratings and reviews, which sometimes gets away from me with everything else I have going on. So I want to thank Anne of 48 Days for taking the time to leave a review, which reads, I have a lot of podcasts in my library, but Desert Lady Diaries is in my top 5. I'm fascinated by the lives of others, especially lives in transition. Desert Lady Diaries informs and entertains while giving us a glimpse of guests before, during, and after a transformative change. I'm so happy to hear that, Anne. Thank you so much for taking the time to go out and leave a review. I really appreciate it and would love it if you would go out on the platform you're listening from and leave a review or a comment. Even if you're listening from SoundCloud, you can leave a comment or just click on the heart to say that you like the episode. Or on YouTube, you can also leave a comment or just give it a thumbs up. I appreciate that. Looking for a new podcast based out of Joshua Tree? Here's Catherine to tell you about her podcast, Myth Matters.
Are you looking for a new way to think and transform? Tune into Myth Matters, a bi-weekly podcast of storytelling and conversation about mythology and why it's important to life today. Find a more creative way to live. Learn more at mythicmojo.com and keep the mystery in your life alive.
And before I let you go, I just want to let you know that I took a deep look at the survey results, the survey that I ran, I guess, at the end of the summer. And probably next week, I'll spend about 5 minutes at the end of the podcast to let you know what those results were and what changes I'm going to make moving forward. See you next week. Thanks so much for listening.